Welcome to the folks who have just come in the last minute or two. We'll be getting started here in about 3 minutes.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Looks like we are still building in size here, but we've got a fair number of people here, and I think I will go ahead and get started. And that way, as folks trickle in, I can go ahead and kind of continue with this introduction. Andrew, does that sound all right with you?
That sounds good.
Great. Okay, so perfect. First, I just wanted to thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate your time. Your input in this project is a really important part of what we're doing. This project is based on a large amount of community engagement and community input that went into our adopted plans, and through this process here, we're continuing to build that community input as we refine the project strategies. So we're going to go through this presentation first, but please know we will set aside plenty of time at the end for question and answer. At this point in time, everyone's microphones are disabled. When we get to that Q&A portion, and I will remind you all of this when we get to this point, please use the raise hand feature, and Andrew will keep track of the queue. And at that point, once you've been called on, we will enable you to unmute yourself and open up your microphone so that you can ask your question. We also have the chat function turned off to avoid any side conversations, and also just to keep it fair for everybody who might have different types of devices or different opportunities to hear this meeting or see this meeting, and also kind of keeps all of the comments and questions in kind of a way that everybody can still see it. If you do have questions that come out of this meeting that you'd rather write down, please go to our website, www.denvergov.org/housing choices, and submit that question using the submit your comment or question button. We are also recording this meeting, and it will be posted online on our webpage within the next couple days. Also on our webpage, you'll find our community survey, as well as a copy of tonight's presentation and the project information boards that we were also using at our in-person meetings that we've held over the last few weeks. And as you know, this is the virtual option for those community meetings, but those boards, as I mentioned, are also available on the webpage. So we're here today, of course, to talk about unlocking housing choices. This project is just one of many ongoing projects that the city is advancing to encourage the creation of more housing in our city. Through this presentation and the Q&A, we hope to give you more details on this project to inform your further participation and inform your feedback so that we can, so that you can engage with this project from a knowledgeable position and you understand what we're proposing. As I said before, you can submit your questions or comments online. We are taking notes and are recording this meeting. And another very valuable point of input is our project survey. So please go online and take that survey if you have not. But with that, want to talk quickly about the, here we go. The quick agenda of what we hope to cover today is first describe what the project is, and then we'll talk about the project schedule, look at some current housing and building trends in Denver, currently what we're seeing, where we're seeing housing getting built, and then we'll dive into the project strategies and the details, and hopefully describe those all to you. And then following that project strategy detail, we will take a look at the next steps in the project and then open up the presentation to questions and answers. So first, what is unlocking housing choices? Unlocking housing choices is what we call a text amendment. It is a change to the zoning rules of the city. And zoning is what controls what you can build on a property and what you can do on a private property in the city. We are changing the zoning rules to allow more small-scale, multi-unit housing options across the city. We are undertaking this change to the zoning rules in order to advance the recommendations of our adopted plans. Those adopted plans respond to a community vision that came out of a years-long public engagement process and told us that the community desires more housing options in more of Denver's lower-scale residential neighborhoods. Another goal of this project and in increasing the number of housing options in our residential neighborhoods is providing more attainable housing options. So more financially attainable, slightly more affordable housing options in Denver's residential neighborhoods. Why are we doing this? Well, Denver is a really expensive place to live, and it is becoming more expensive. Denver is an first and foremost an expensive place to live because people continue to move here because it's a great place to live. That's why we're all here. We enjoy living in this city, and we want to continue to guide how it changes and evolves over time, so that it continues to be a great city. Another reason why Denver's housing is so expensive is as people have continued to move to the city, our zoning has remained fairly restrictive in several ways and has limited the amount of new housing that can be built. This has limited this housing production and kept the number of new housing units from keeping up with with the demand as it increases and with people moving into the city. There are a number of other causes for the increasing housing costs that we do not have control over. These are things like construction costs, like materials and labor, both which are significantly increasing in price. Interest rates we don't have any control over. The job market, if it continues to be strong, we don't have any control over that. And these are things that are out of our control and can continue to increase the price of housing. However, our department, which is Community Planning and Development, does have the ability to update the zoning rules across the city and enable a wider array of housing options for residents in Denver. So this map shows Denver's predominantly single unit zoned areas. So this is a map of the city that excludes the airport and shows the zoning in the city and highlights single unit zoned areas under the Denver zoning code in this straw color, and some of the areas shown in gray here are the corresponding single unit zoned areas in former Chapter 59, which is our old code. There are still a small number of areas of properties in the city that still have this old code zoning. But the big takeaway from this slide here is that 40% of Denver's land area only allows for single unit homes. And these areas are essentially built out. Most of the properties within these areas already have a home on them, and there is not much additional ability for these areas to absorb any housing need as people continue to move into the city. The types of housing that we do see built in these areas are typically very large homes that are replacing smaller and more affordable homes. And over time, this trend of not being able to build any more housing within this wide area of the city has contributed to the housing shortage and the affordability crisis in the city. This map shows where the Unlocking Housing Choices project will apply. And as you can see, the project will apply to the single unit zoned areas that were highlighted on that previous map, as well as the row house and 2-unit zone districts in yellow and orange on this map. There's also a darker yellowish color that shows the other corresponding former Chapter 59 zone districts that will be included in this project by way of a bridge amendment. But because this project affects such a large area, even though we make changes that would only moderately impact or increase the amount of housing, the cumulative impact is significant, while each individual neighborhood does not experience a dramatic change. So you can think of Denver's or housing in general as a ladder. The housing market is this ladder shown here, and at the top, the most expensive options are single family homes, and then towards the bottom are apartment buildings and condominiums. These are our more affordable housing types, and in the middle, there's this missing middle housing type that we really have not produced as a city in the last 50 years. This is something nationwide that has been a trend. Most zoning codes across the country limit in one way or another these missing middle housing types, which are can be understood as house scale multi-unit housing types. These housing types are really important. They prevent people from maybe at the top, if you're a individual who's lived in a neighborhood your whole life and your kids are moved out of the house and you are looking to downsize, but you don't want to leave your neighborhood. Allowing these missing middle housing types within these neighborhoods can allow that family, that couple to move into a smaller house, but still remain in their in their same neighborhood. This missing middle housing type also helps folks who are climbing the ladder, right? From an apartment building, a younger family is looking to move out of an apartment building, but they can't maybe quite afford a single family home, especially in Denver where they're so expensive. Well, missing middle housing types are a solution that can help provide a more affordable, slightly more affordable housing type that has a lot of the amenities of a single family home, like a private entrance, right, a front door, so to speak, and maybe a small yard, um, and allows some of those amenities in a more residential environment. So if we allow this missing middle housing type, we're allowing these smaller single unit homes. We're allowing these housing types that are less expensive than single unit homes, um, but they're in that same residential setting as a single family home. This would allow more people to buy their first home or to downsize, and ultimately stay in their neighborhood as their housing needs change. So we are also undertaking this project in order to advance the goals and strategies in our adopted plans. Unlocking Housing Choices is developed based on policy recommendations that are in our adopted plans, including the comprehensive plan, which forecasts growth in the city to the year 2040, and Blueprint Denver, which is a supplement to that comprehensive plan that focuses on policy making decisions for land use and transportation more specifically. Our adopted plans describe the community vision for the future after a years-long public process, and these plans were adopted by City Council around 2019 to 2020. These plans are the policy guides and not specific regulations. And then through this project is how we change the regulations in order to make these plans and what they say a reality. So specifically, the key recommendation in Blueprint Denver, which again is a supplement for the comprehensive plan, directs us to diversify housing options by exploring opportunities to integrate missing middle housing into low and low-medium residential areas. Blueprint Denver also tells us to do this with a focus on discouraging demolition and encouraging affordability. So I described missing middle before as how it fits into the whole spectrum of housing, but these are some images of different missing middle housing types. And again, as I described them, they are these more house scale, multi-family housing types that really provide a smaller and more affordable housing option that is still very residential in nature, rather than an apartment building that might be along a busier corridor or mixed use area. These housing types fit much better into quieter residential settings. So to take a quick look at the project schedule, Unlocking Housing Choices is a two-phased project. The first phase is what we're talking about today, and will focus on enabling missing middle housing with a focus on affordability, preservation, and design. The second phase will explore more market rate approaches and expanding missing middle housing without the incentives or requirements that we're talking about in phase one, specifically where or particularly where our plans call for it. But the strategies that we're going to look at today is all within phase one, and this is what we are looking at to bring to City Council for approval by the end of 2026. So within this first phase, we are currently in the process of developing our recommendations and the strategy that we're going to move forward with. We're reviewing and testing the potential changes that we're going to make to the code. We are also working, or I guess at the beginning of summer, we will begin drafting the actual text amendment to the Denver zoning code that will make the changes to what can be built on properties. And then starting in the fall, we will begin the adoption process, and that that is a public process as well, with public hearings, city council, and the planning board. Also, along that same timeline, we have a fair amount of additional public engagement opportunities beyond this one tonight. So we are here, we are just wrapping up this first round of public meetings. We also have a survey that I mentioned earlier that's available online. And also ongoing right now, we have our advisory committee that meets semi-monthly. Uh, now through August to help us develop the project strategies. Additionally, we are meeting with registered neighborhood organization, community groups, and other focus groups to also solicit input on the project. Later in the summer, we will have another round of public meetings similar to this one and the ones we've held around the city to get more public input at that time, since we will have more details of our of the strategies that we're bringing forward. Following that second round of public meetings, there will be public hearings with planning board and city council during the adoption process. So now to quickly take a look at a few current trends that have brought us to this point in our housing market. So when an existing house is demolished and replaced with a new house, that new house is typically over $1.4 million and more than 3,000 square feet in size, right? So very large and very expensive homes. That's typically what we're seeing being built in the areas that are applicable to this project. But when that existing house is demolished or placed with a duplex, triplex, or row house, which are the missing middle housing types that are currently allowed in limited locations in Denver, the majority of those new homes cost less than $800,000 and are smaller than 3,000 square feet. Of course, that new home is still very expensive, and that existing home was often cheaper and smaller than that new home that is replacing it. And that's one of the reasons why Blueprint Denver calls for this project to explore incentives for keeping the smaller, cheaper homes in place when more new homes are built. And additionally, that $800,000 house is still out of reach for most Denverites, which is why Blueprint Denver calls for this project to explore incentives for new units to be restricted at even more affordable houses when more homes are built. So that is describes some of the general focus that we're taking in this project. And when we look at our strategies, you will see how those focus points are tied in there. These two maps show where new single unit and new missing middle housing has been built in Denver since 2010. And as you can see, even though they do differ slightly based on the different zone districts, there are areas where their single unit and missing middle housing types are largely aligned. This is because the location, access, and market conditions of these areas are what drive the location of redevelopment, not zoning alone. So Pierce City's analysis also shows us the same thing. In cities that have completed projects similar to Unlocking Housing Choices, see that development continues to occur in the same areas as it did before the changes were adopted. So now let's take a look at these project strategy details. So as I mentioned, the Unlocking Housing Choices has three key project strategies. First, Unlocking Housing Choices will update the rules for new buildings to limit mass and scale of the new development within our low-scale residential neighborhoods. Unlocking Housing Choices will also enable more housing when the existing structure is retained. And Unlocking Housing Choices will enable more housing when one or more of the new units is affordable. So there are potentially two, or essentially two, different opportunities for missing middle housing to be added through the Unlocking Housing Choices. It is either requiring the existing house to remain or provide an affordable housing unit. If you keep the existing house, an affordable housing unit is not required. And if you provide an affordable housing unit, the existing house is not required to be retained. So let's take a closer look at each of these strategies, starting with this first strategy, and we'll break it up into two pieces, being 1A and 1B here. So we're considering a large number of changes and updates to our building form standards to make house scale development fit more compatibly with the existing neighborhoods. This includes revising how we regulate third floors, which we call half stories, and second story terraces, balconies, porches, wall height, and wall length. These changes would apply to all new single unit and missing middle housing development under this project. This responds largely to adopted plan guidance, both the citywide level and in adopted area plans, that raises concern about the size of new houses being built within existing single unit neighborhoods. In addition to those design changes, we will also be establishing a maximum floor area limitation on residential development. This floor area maximum will increase for each housing unit, and this creates a financial incentive for builders to build missing middle housing. This will enable uh, uh, excuse me, yes, this will enable us to financially incentivize missing middle housing while still maintaining the size and scale that's appropriate for that neighborhood. So even though we have the same design standards and building form standards, this floor area limitation acts as that financial incentive, both to moderate the size of new homes and encourage the development of additional dwelling units on properties while still being house scale. Our current building forms allow for houses that are often 2 to 3 times the size of homes in our existing neighborhoods. And these strategies will help moderate the price of those new homes and moderate the size of these new homes. This will also slow the speculative redevelopment in our residential neighborhoods and promote the redevelopment of missing middle housing types. So in addition to those building form changes, the new housing will be allowed when the existing structure or house is retained. So this slide shows a few examples of what that might look like. This strategy promotes the preservation of existing smaller homes while still allowing flexibility to property owners and home builders to add value to that property. This helps advance the plan guidance in Blueprint Denver and multiple of our area plans that call for the preservation of existing homes while considering missing middle housing. So, for example, in this situation, a home builder could buy a lot with a smaller house on it, and rather than scraping that smaller house and building a very large new home, that builder could retain that small house, renovate it, and add 1 or 2 additional housing units at the rear. That would result in 3 more moderately sized homes than what would otherwise be developed. And that still provides an incentive enough for that builder so that we actually see this built in the communities. And once again, this is within that reduced scale and size of what we currently allow for a single home. Our financial feasibility testing has shown that there is still plenty of room to build multiple units within our kind of the lots within Denver. And as you can see here, the example on the top right adds 2 additional housing units that are both 2,000 square feet in size, so very, substantially sized units, and preserves that existing 900 square foot house in the front. And the situation in the bottom center is kind of the opposite, with the large house in the front being retained and 2 smaller homes being built in the rear. So this allows for about the same amount of floor area that we're seeing built in a lot of the current redevelopment, uh, but allows additional units within that current size. So finally, unlocking housing choices will allow more housing with one or more of those new housing units being affordable. So this strategy would allow for a completely new structure or complete redevelopment of a property. So the existing home could be demolished and replaced, but at least one of the new housing units would be need to be affordable. Most likely, this is going to be deed restricted as affordable. However, we are exploring opportunities to limit size and create a certain bedroom count for a family-sized unit, or also we're exploring opportunities to work with community land trusts to provide for sale housing products at that affordable level. So we're still working on uh, uh, how that applicability would work and how we would administer that. But these missing middle housing types have a unique advantage to provide a for sale housing unit at a lower cost than a single unit house. And so we're trying to look at ways we can leverage that and provide more affordable for sale products. So next steps, we are just finishing up our round of public engagement. So we are our next steps will be to kind of collect all of this, um, uh, everything that we've heard from the public over the last several weeks, continue to work with our advisory committee and develop and refine our project strategies. And then there'll be additional public engagement later this summer before city council and planning board public hearings. Additionally, we have our ongoing advisory committee meetings. Our next meeting with the advisory committee is tomorrow, where we'll be talking about financial feasibility findings for the Urban Edge neighborhood. And then in May, we will talk about financial feasibility for the suburban neighborhood context. And then following those two meetings, we will kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of the strategy details, and continue working to refine those strategies. So with that, yeah, that is um, concludes the presentation. And at this point, we'd like to open it up for questions and answers. I'm happy to return to any slides that I previously showed. So if you would like to see one again, please let me know which slide you'd like to return to, and I'm happy to bring it back there. But we'll start. Looks like Lucia, you had your hand up first, so please go ahead.
Yeah, Lucia, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
You should be able to unmute yourself. Maybe we'll come back to you. Rob, are you able to unmute
Sure.
yourself?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So when you guys were doing the analysis of like the impact of various unit counts on affordability, did you also look at the effect that the added supply of that housing would have, not just on the units on a parcel, but also throughout the metro?
Do you mean kind of like the cumulative as we're allowing or adding more supply, how it can bring prices down, or
Yeah,
if it brings prices down?
that's a pretty major effect of building new
Uh-huh.
housing. And I just want to make sure that that gets accounted for in this. Do you know if that was accounted for in this stage yet, or?
That's a great question. So it isn't calculated into our immediate financial feasibility studies because that is the kind of long-term benefit of this project over time. That is how this project will, as you might be getting at, most effectively improve the affordability within our city is by increasing and improving that supply over a long period of time. It will bring down the cost of housing, as you said, not only on these individual parcels, but kind of at the citywide level. So it wasn't included in our like financial feasibility and what the costs are that we're looking at, since we're trying to figure out what the cost is to build and sell a unit, kind of within the next, couple like next year or so, so to speak, with current construction costs and things like that. However, we are considering the benefits of that long-term added supply as a benefit of this project, because it's kind of crucially how this works.
Yeah, that does seem to me to be like an incomplete analysis that ends up underselling the benefits of adding a lot of new housing supply. So I would encourage, if there's still time to add something like that, to add that to this analysis before it goes to council or, as it's getting developed. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I think I might have misunderstood your question. I thought you were asking about our financial feasibility study that I referred to, and yeah, we'll make sure to emphasize that how this project as a whole can bring down housing costs.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the effects are pretty quick with new supply. Look in the rental market, that brought down rents in Denver basically within about a year or two. And it takes a little bit of time to trickle down to the smaller or the lower income segments of the market because of moving chains. But it's not, it doesn't take a decade. It's usually around between 2 and 4 years. So
All right, great. Thank you, Rob.
thanks.
Mhm.
All right, Rob, I am going to pull up Troy Foster now. Troy, your mic you should be able to unmute.
Hi, thank you. Rob, thanks for the presentation this afternoon. My question's more on the design end. I saw some slides prior that had back cottages or rear cottages that seem to face the unit in the front. Is there any considerations that you're having around off-street parking, potentially eliminating any requirements around that and having more alley-facing cottages, or kind of treating those alleys more as streets?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So we are the city actually no longer, as of last year, doesn't require off-street parking for any new residential development, and for a long time has not required off-street parking for single unit homes. So we did this testing both with parking provided on street and on the lots individually. And most of the time at this point, what we're seeing is the market is still likely going to provide parking on site for most of these new units, just because it's something that people want typically, but it's not required in Denver, and we kind of, there is a trade-off at a certain point where you can kind of build more area, within the house, if you don't have the parking provided off-site or off street, excuse me. So we've tested all of those different scenarios, and yes, we've got examples that, yeah, more closely face that street, and the way that the code changes are going to be would allow for kind of this really broad range of different solutions. This example down here in the bottom, on the bottom, you could essentially flip it 180 degrees and it would still fit within the code. So that porch would face, or that porch area would face the alley. So yes,
Great.
we're allowing for a range of different solutions.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Rob, we have 9 people in the queue right now, but I'm going to go back to Lucia because she was in first and was having some microphone issues. It looks like her mic is on now. So Lucia, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much. It was just grayed out. It would not unmute. Anyway, so I wanted, if you could go back to the slide where you're talking about the building form. I think it's
Yeah, I think it's right here.
Yeah. So that one on the left, you're seeing these everywhere all over Denver. To me, they've actually become very characteristically Denver. There's some units being built like these just down the block from me, and they're wonderful, I think. because you get a rooftop deck. And I don't understand how changing this to not allow people to have a rooftop deck does anything to unlock any more housing. This is just sort of I don't even know why this is being changed. It's doing nothing to add to our housing stock. So I don't know why this is being included in here.
Yeah, great questions, Lucia. I appreciate that input, and you're right. It is a kind of a tangential change that we're making to the code as we are getting in here and updating our building forms. Our plans have reflected comments and public input that the housing that we're seeing built in their neighborhoods are not of an appropriate size and scale compared to what fits in their neighborhoods. So these changes are in order to ensure that as we're broadening the allowance for new numbers of units, that we do that in a way that is more consistent with the size and scale of existing houses. The third story that change that we're making here is really just for that definition of a half story. So rather than related to kind of the size right now, the half story definition, requires it be less than 75% of the floor area and has a couple other caveats. We're going to bring that more in line with how other cities and how, for a long time, Denver historically defined a half story. At a certain point in the code that changed, and then we're currently seeing this proliferation of housing types that looks like this building on the left. And because of what we've heard from communities and our adopted plans, we are making these changes since we're talking about house scale housing, right? House scale building, house scale multifamily buildings is a way that we're characterizing missing middle housing. And to truly make that house scale, that's why we're making these changes here. To be clear, a rooftop patio would still absolutely be allowed under these new standards. You might just have to configure it a little bit differently, but you're right, it's something that people value. But thanks for your question. I appreciate that comment.
Great.
I will.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Rob.
no, go
Sorry.
ahead.
I was going to say we can call up Scott Bryans is next, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on your mic, Scott. You should be able to unmute.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we
Sure
can.
Great. So my question was, in these scenarios where you have, either 3 or 4 houses on a single zone lot, you didn't really talk about like ownership. Does it work like an accessory dwelling unit, or that's accessory to the main house, or is it like 3 or 4 primary structures on a single zone lot, or can the zone lot be divided into 3 or 4 portions, or
Yeah,
both?
great question. So, this would not change the boundaries of the zone lot, but would allow for multiple primary structures on that same zone lot. So, uh, uh, those situations, whether it be this example on the right, which is the 3 cottages, those could be under 3 separate ownership parcels. It could also be under in other places we're seeing that like the land is under a common ownership, and then the different dwellings are kind of a condominium type. So there's kind of a lot of flexibility there, but they could potentially be owned separately through one of those different mechanisms.
So then you would definitely have the option where they could be rentals or owned by separate individuals.
That's correct, right? The only right now benefit that or not only, but one of the key benefits that an accessory dwelling unit would retain is the ability to be a short-term rental, since you're not able to short-term rent your primary dwelling unless you also live there. So with one of these, if you couldn't have it as a short-term rental unless it's an ADU, which these wouldn't be. So A little bit of nuance there, but yeah, great question.
And just a quick follow-up question. Are
Sure.
you currently just considering these scenarios for lots 5,000 square feet and larger?
No, great question. It would be uh, we are not planning on making any changes to the minimum lot size. So this would be allowed for lots that are smaller, but it's unlikely that you'd really have the room to do these 3 units as shown here. So kind of what we've seen is in our financial feasibility testing, it's somewhat self-limiting, but yes, this would be allowed in under the same current minimum lot sizes.
I mean, theoretically, you could do like on a smaller lot, you could have, the main existing house, and then in the back, instead of having an ADU as accessory, you could do a second primary structure.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Next up, we have someone with the initials DG. DG, I'm going to go ahead and turn on your mic, and you should be able to unmute and feel free to join us.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So thank you. I've got a couple comments. I agree with the previous lady, Lucia. I think that restricting and modifying duplex shapes is unnecessary, frankly. I don't think we need to have any modification to that at all. People really love a third story. People really love the building heights that we're creating, and people just really love them in general. I think it's negative to add something or modify something that's not needed. I think that these modifications are probably more appropriate for lots where people might want to add an additional house to their lot, additional structures to the lot. But if, for instance, where people are not wanting to do that, you're setting the same rule for them, which I think is unfair to them. I really think that the zoning standards should stay the way they are, and maybe utilize these reductions as like an overlay to the restrictions that we already have, and leaving the people that, well, if they don't want to have an additional house in their lot, leave it at that. I also think that reducing restrictions like this simply gives people and homeowners more flexibility. I foresee that, yeah, there's going to be a need for this, but I don't really see a lot of people doing this, frankly, from my perspective. And I think that it's detrimental to reduce our lot sizes across the board as house sizes, boat plane restrictions, things like that across the board, when it should just be applied to the certain individuals that want to take this path.
Yeah, great comments. I really appreciate kind of where your head is and where you're thinking. One of the main reasons that we are applying the limitations to single unit homes as well is this has kind of come out of what other cities who have done similar projects are finding as a best practice. And if we don't make any changes to the um, what can be built under just a single unit where they can now, what they see is a continued proliferation of these really large houses where you lose maybe a smaller, more moderately sized house and it's replaced by a really large house. And so in order to encourage builders to actually build the types of housing that we need, which are kind of more moderately sized housing types that are in these residential areas. This is kind of what we lack in Denver. In order to encourage those to be built, there needs to be some financial incentive, and that financial incentive is kind of most effective through that size limitation and upward scaling as you allow those additional units.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I just feel like I feel like it should not be applied to everyone. People should be given the option to utilize that path, whether they want to or not. A person in a 5,000 square foot property might want an individual home with a garage and leave it at that. But they're still restricted by the person who has a 5,000 square foot lot and wants to build 2 houses on there, but they have to make them smaller based on the new restrictions. I don't think it's appropriate or even prudent to modify these rules based on these new restrictions. I think we should just keep them the way they are and provide an overlay for individuals that want to proceed on this kind of building shape and desire.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Well, I appreciate the comment, and I'd ask you to, make sure you go to our survey and take the survey so that you can kind of fully get that input heard, or on our comment form as well. And of course, we've got it noted here. But thanks for taking the time and being here and giving us your comment.
Thank you.
All right, next up I have Richard Papinash. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced your name, Richard. You should be able to unmute.
Hello. My name's Richard. I'm actually a developer in the city of Denver. I do agree with you guys. I think there's a need for more housing. Like, I like the ideas of duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. I think you guys are just going it all the wrong way. I'll start with your sizing and the rooftops. I'm sure you guys got a sample of people wanting to keep the smaller housing, but most of the show that sample is probably filled with older gentlemen and ladies that come to your meetings, attend the meetings, and it's not really consensus of the whole general population of Denver. I think that should be taken into account, because I don't know in your surveys or where you're getting this comment, if you're getting a broad range of people, but in my studies of, yes, the people who have been in the neighborhood for a long time and don't want to get their houses overseen by people with rooftops, or just don't like bigger houses because they're an older person that doesn't have a big family is going to not want bigger houses. But I've seen younger people with moving in with their families that have 3, 4, 5 kids, 6, however much they need the space. My house alone, I live in a duplex and I have 3 people living in it with me. So, and those are roommates, and we all share the space, and there's no way I could do that otherwise. The other thing I wanted to bring up is just in terms of the whole ADU properties and stuff. I just don't think a lot of developers would develop them. I don't think a lot of people want strangers in their backyards. I personally built a couple of duplex ADUs myself, and they were not very well received. And I think you guys are, again, if you allowed more duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, I think that's a great idea. I would always build a duplex, triplex, quadplex instead of a single family home. But the way you guys are going in terms of just trying to push builders to make more affordable homes and keeping the homes as they are now, you're going to push more and more of us out, and you're going to limit the supply in Denver and actually end up increasing the prices.
All right, thank you, Richard. I appreciate that input. I think my response would be this similar to what I said before. I think but I think we we are considering the needs of lots of different Denverites. There are still lots of very large homes that exist across the city, and lots of places where those large homes can still be built. And we have a situation where right now we don't allow a lot of the kind of middle-sized, there's missing middle housing types to be built, and are looking to encourage that to meet that market demand and address the input that we've had in our adopted plans. That's where a lot of the input comes that has driven this. So again, I appreciate your comment, and yeah, look forward to seeing your comment or survey input on our webpage. But thank you.
Thank you.
All right, great, Rob. We have next up is Darren Bloom, and it looks like Darren already has his mic on.
Yeah. Hi, guys. So I think you actually solved this problem a bunch of years ago, but it became extremely unpopular. It was called a slot house. And why it was solved, and I'm not saying whether I like the design or not, right? But how it was solved is it would put 4 or 5 units on a single lot, and because of the density and because of the size and whatever, the developers could make money, right? So there was a financial incentive for a developer to go and do it and increase that. And they clearly weren't affordable housing level cost, but they were more affordable than a single family home. And then, as you probably are very well aware, 2018, it got voted out. Everybody hated the way they looked, blah, blah, blah. So this, to me, feels very slot home-ish, just in a different format. And so I think there's a lot of caution there. Yeah, but I think my personal thing is, I think the real challenge that the city have is not around the specific design of what they're doing. It's about reining in the cost of construction. So I'm going to tell a very personal story. I'm building a house right now. I live in Park Hill. I'm building a house right across the road from my current house. Andrew actually helped me get some rezoning done a couple of years back. And long story short, I would only need a 2,500, 3,000 square foot house, but I'm building a 4,500 square foot house because the fixed costs to building are so enormous. And when I say the fixed costs, I'm talking about what the city's charging. So $32,000 linkage fee, $8,000 tap fee for the water, $8,500 tap fee for the sewer, an extra $50,000 in insulation for the new house as compared to my existing house, which, by the way, my existing house, I've got my electric bill right here, is $110 a month. So the city is mandating all these very, very high cost items, which inhibit affordable construction, right? So I think that's somewhere where you have to look. So I did some numbers on, hey, if I bought a piece of land and I put 4 houses there, how much would it cost? It would end up cost, not sale, but cost, in my estimation. You're looking at $450 a square foot for these little cottages. And you sit there and you go, okay, well, $450 a square foot times 800 square feet, that becomes a very expensive little house. And so are you actually building them for the people that you're trying to target? And I don't think the finances line up. Like, that's a very, very, very expensive small space, right? And so I think there's nothing wrong with trying to make this type of scheme work, I think, but the finances are broken. The finances don't work. And having going through this right now, personally, I look at the city and I think the city is over-regulating many things. And, like the linkage fee, I think is a crime, right? It's a slush fund that the city can put money into projects they want to do instead of encouraging the citizens of Denver to build more affordable housing. So, it's chicken, egg, that type of thing, right?
Darren, I appreciate your comment. I think that's a great point, and we are continuing to work within our agency and with other agencies to try to figure out ways that we can continue to bring down those costs, because those are things that you are by far not the first person to bring them up as significant barriers to building housing and housing at a lower cost, because it does add to that price per square footage. So hear you loud and clear. I think that I think we are focused on this zoning piece, and can make these changes. But I think, we've been looking at this as one of the advantages of the two-phased approach, is we're able to, continue with, after we get this first phase through, to kind of take a step back, look at everything, see what's working, and continue to work on some of those other barriers, that a lot of times those agencies, and the city as a whole, and all these agencies are, a cruise liner, right? So they don't turn on a dime. So, by kind of starting this turn right now, right, with this first phase of the project, then we can continue working with them to try to see what we can do to bring those other costs down. I appreciate that comment. I think I think you've identified a lot of the same barriers that we're hearing from a wide range of builders and developers and homeowners and just regular property owners too. So I will say, I think that you also kind of hit the nail on the head with the comparison to slot homes. And I think that the city did, in a way, lose a valuable housing type when we got rid of the slot homes. What we are trying to do here is, at a certain point, kind of reallow some of that, but fix, rather than just kind of be so or as blunt as we were in 2018, but kind of maybe fix some of the things with that building form that people liked, that really made those forms problematic, because, whether it was the height, or the way that parking and drive alley was in between the buildings or along the side, or that the parking was always underneath, and then, how they just kind of how they felt, or any of those things. We're going to try to address those and kind of reallow some of that. They'll look very different, and hopefully people won't see them as a type of slot home. But yeah, you're right. We in a way lost a housing type with those, and never replaced it. So yeah, we're not re-legalizing slot homes per se, but we're looking, because we are some of those kind of front to back oriented buildings are kind of what we're seeing built in other cities, like Portland in particular. So we're going to try to get ahead of it and address some of those main concerns that people had in slot homes. But yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks for being here and being heard. I appreciate it, Darren.
Thanks.
Great, thanks, Darren. Next, we're going to go to Kevin Matthews. Kevin, I've turned on your mic. You should be able to unmute.
Perfect. Is that working?
I can hear you.
Perfect. Great. Thanks, Rob, for the great presentation. So my question is around the preservation incentive, because you have the two incentives. You can either preserve a home for additional units, or the affordability requirements. And I'm wondering if you could kind of shed a little light on what the rationale is for the preservation incentive. One of the concerns I have is that, so I live in the neighborhood of Congress Park, and we've had a number of pop tops and stuff for the last few years. And about a couple of years ago, there was a home but a block from me, and for whatever reason, the owner actually tore down the entire house, and he just sold the lot. But because our lot values are so high, he still sold it for well in advance of $700K. And that basically meant that, like, the home that was built was a very, very large home. It sold for north of $2 million. And my impression is that that this policy is meant to disincentivize that sort of housing. And if there's a preservation requirement, like my understanding is that you could still tear down a home and build a large single family home, north of to the max building height or the max square footage, and that's not what we want. But you wouldn't be able to build, cheaper units that are more affordable. So I guess I'm just trying to understand why that preservation requirement is part of this process.
Yeah, great question. So to be clear, and I think I was taking a note, so I want to make sure that I understood your question too. So because I think I might have missed something. So when this this incentive here would allow for or we're currently considering that it would allow for a pop top or an addition onto the existing structure. It would also allow for an existing structure to be divided. We do understand that it is not a perfect solution, and there are some downsides to incentivizing the preservation of a home that maybe has had some deferred maintenance and is not as efficient, and doesn't that's going to cost a lot to bring up to code in certain ways and things. And so this isn't perfect, and I think that again this is one of the reasons why it's going to be a really big advantage for us to be able to continue developing this in the second phase. Look back at this too and say, hey, like what maybe is broken about this, or what's not working, or how can we do something, what can we add to this that makes it work better. Maybe there are some other incentives or bonuses that we can tweak to kind of get the outcomes that we're looking for. But so if the scrape and replacement of let's say this existing 2,200 square foot house in the front with a new house would still be subject to the limitations on this slide.
Sure. I guess the specific example I'm mentioning, like they actually tore down the entire house.
Okay.
And they just sold the lot. And so in
Gotcha.
that particular case, and there's a lot of reasons they did that, but I guess in that particular case, the next person who bought the lot, who wanted to redevelop it, my impression is that they would be limited under this.
That's right.
Under
Yeah,
this.
they would.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so I guess I'm just trying to understand what the rationale is for limiting that, if all we're going to get out of the result of that is going to be the most expensive type of housing unit, which we know is a problem because only certain people can afford a $2 million home, and that changes the neighborhood. That means only certain people can live here. So I'm just trying to understand why that preservation incentive is part of this process in phase one.
So I'm hoping that the example that you're describing is somewhat rare, and Andrew, maybe you can help me out. Maybe I'm missing the point that you're trying to make here, is that so if that person hadn't demolished that house and they had just sold the property with that house on it, then that buyer, whoever bought it, could have done, they could have built something as shown on one of these slides here.
Yep.
Or on this slide here. But really it's just because they, that house was demolished that they're limited. They could build, something with an affordable unit, but you're right. So the reason that our first two strategies limit this in this way, right, is it might have some of those missed opportunities like you're describing. And I think that's, to characterize it honestly, that's probably what it would be, a missed opportunity where that lot could have had additional units, but because at that time maybe this is what was in place within this first phase. That's but what the main reason that we're starting in the first phase with this strategy is because our plans tell us to is specifically that language that I pointed out in Blueprint Denver on that on this earlier slide that directs us to focus on discouraging demolition and encouraging affordability. And there are other adopted plans that are more recently adopted. The near south, I think it's near southeast plan is another one that has really strong language about, that missing middle housing is okay, or should be developed, but when an existing house is preserved, or has language similar to this, but in some cases it's even stronger. And so that's one of the reasons why within this first phase we are really focused on kind of allowing this only within these two areas. So that's probably the best answer I have. Otherwise, I think you're pointing out what's probably best described as a missed opportunity.
Okay, well, thank you for explaining where the rationale is coming from.
Of course, thanks. Yeah, great question.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Next up, Rob, we have Tara Mazzeo.
Thanks, Andrew, and Rob, thanks for the presentation. It was really clear. I have a really quick question, which is simply, I think right now there is a requirement for an owner to occupy a site at the time of permit of an ADU. Is that okay? Is that something like that going to be in effect here? Is there an owner occupancy requirement of any kind at the time of permit or otherwise that's being contemplated?
No, we are not currently considering any owner occupancy requirements. This could be 3 separate owners or 2 separate owners, depending on the layout of what's proposed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of course.
Great, thanks, Tara. Next up, we have Linda Brunn. Linda, your mic should be unmutable. You'll need to unmute it from your end.
See, if you're in the app, it's in the top right. I'm not sure if you're in a browser window, it might be somewhere different.
What I'll probably do, Linda, is go ahead and move on to our next speaker, but we'll come back to you and see if you're able
keep looking for it.
And
we'll pop over to Don.
So moving to Don. Don, you should be able to unmute.
Yes, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with some of the other folks that spoke earlier. I do think you're on the right track. I do think with the vast amounts of single family zoning throughout the city, unlocking that and just making it more available for more units and smaller units on the existing platted lots is a key strategy. The economics will come and go. So part of my comment is I want you to keep doing the financial and economic feasibility analysis, but that changes year to year, and it changes as the supply of housing gets further constricted or loosens. And so it's a moving target. Things that may not be affordable today or very expensive may change in the future. And one of the things that does change them is making more land available for this. So I'm really not interested in the short term or versus long term. It is the Titanic. It changes direction very slowly. My main comment is that I think it is important to deal with this form change. So I'm disagreeing with the previous speakers. When I talk to people about what they're unhappy about development in Denver, the boxiness and out of character-edness of what you showed as the existing form controls is about the first thing they mention. So I think this is part of a package. My take on many people is they're not so worried about additional units. They're worried about the building or buildings being so out of character with what has been already developed in the neighborhood. So I actually think you're on the right track. And I actually think that there is a much better chance of getting the 2 bonuses and incentives adopted if they are paired with form changes that are popular with people. And so I guess I just disagree. Depends on who you talk to. But the folks I talk to would vastly prefer what's on the right side of the screen to what's on a continued norm of the left side. Thanks.
Thank you, Don.
Great. Thanks, Don. So I'm going to go back to Linda. Linda, now it looks like you may have logged on, or someone there with you may have logged on under another account as well. I've enabled both of your mics, so you should be able to unmute one of those, or either, both. It typically involves just clicking on the little microphone icon. Okay, well, unfortunately,
if we're unable to get to you in this way, we can follow up and get to you the other way too. But keep trying. We'll maybe keep your mic unlocked.
Yep, and I see your email here in the participants. So if you're not able to figure out how to unmute, we'll reach out and see if we can connect in another way. So we'll come back to the Bruns one more time, but for now we're going to go to Caitlin Fortner. Caitlin, I've gone ahead and unlocked your mic. You should be able to unmute. Caitlin, just checking if you can hear us. You should be able to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
There we go.
There's some echo here for some reason. But one of the questions I have is, with these additional units in the back, will they require additional water and sewer tap fees?
Yes, they would require additional tap fees, and that is something that, is a barrier. They are fairly expensive, but yeah, would need new taps, new service lines. Yes.
And the previous people talked about liking the third floor rooftop decks, and in our neighborhood here, people are very happy about the new option, the proposed rules.
Okay, great. That's yeah. Thank you. Yeah, there are probably going to be places where, rooftop patios would still be allowed, but it would be potentially more limited and potentially, in slightly different configurations than kind of where we're seeing them currently, which are these kind of large wraparound form. But we're trying to strike a middle ground here. But I appreciate your comment.
Because our neighborhood has been affected a lot. Within a block and a half of my house, there have been 30 scrapes.
Wow.
Okay, great. Well, Brun family, I'm glad you were able to join. Thanks for your comments. I'm going to try Caitlin one more time. Caitlin, you should be able to unmute if you're there.
Do you see the microphone icon? And it's just gray. Andrew, would you try? Let's see. Let me see if I can do it. I'm going to disable and then allow again. Nothing still? Okay. I'm trying to disable it and then re-enable it.
Yeah, from our end, it definitely looks like you should be able to unmute it.
Yeah. Oh, well, sorry about that, Caitlin. Yeah, please give us your comment on our form online or email. Sorry about the issue. Or if you keep working and figure it out, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, and just to highlight, we've had a couple other guests that have actually left the meeting and come back, and that actually was for whatever reason kind of reset the mic, and they were able to unmute. So if you hop back on, I'll keep an eye out for you. and we still have a few minutes here. So if you're able to hop off the meeting and rejoin, and we might be able to make that work. But otherwise, yeah, you can reach out to us otherwise. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to Coco. Coco, you should be able to unmute. Coco, checking if you can hear us. You should be able to click the microphone icon to unmute. Okay, well, we'll leave Coco set up so that she can unmute if she's able to, and it looks like we have DG back in the queue. So DG, I'm going to go ahead and turn on your mic here. You should be able to unmute.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
All right, great. No, I just wanted to circle back around and echo what Richard and Darren had both mentioned. Yeah, I think that the majority of the people out there that are looking to build new homes are definitely in favor of what the current rules are definitely like. I know that people that are not in favor with the rules are the ones that are not building new homes. And I also realized back in 2008, 17, 18, I was involved in all that too, where slot homes were certainly adding density to the city. And of course, at the time, density was not something the city wanted. Now we're circling back around, and yeah, we do want density, which of course is definitely needed because we're limited and surrounded. We're surrounded on all sides, but I think that density is important. I do think that affordable housing is important. I think part of the aspects that affordable housing can make it easier for people is to, I think maybe relabel the name affordable housing, because yes, those fees for new homes are super expensive. And just really make no sense why they have to be so expensive. Because I think that most people that would want to add an ADU, they might not be able to afford that affordable housing fee as well. In addition to the building costs that it takes to create these second structures. I think it's really important to stay focused, as well as reducing city taxes, reducing state taxes. State taxes went up last year and went up quite a bit for a lot of people. So those are things that I think that we need to still consider first and foremost before we change everything else, because those affect many people, not just people building new homes. So yeah, just wanted to echo that.
Great. Well, thank you again for your comments. I will say that, there one of the key reasons that, we don't see a whole lot of people building these housing types that we're trying to enable is because they're currently not allowed most places. So yeah, it's hard to compare, the need with, what we see getting built and kind of compare that to, well, people are building this and they're not actually building these things, and it's largely because we don't allow it in most places. So again, I hear you loud and clear, and I appreciate the comments and taking the time to be here. But yes, yeah, thank you. Let's try.
I can come back. Let's try see if Linda Brunn was able to unmute. Looks like she may have. Actually, sorry, we already had the Brunns. My apologies. Caitlin Fortner, are you able to unmute?
Yeah, I switched computers.
Great.
So now, yeah. Yeah, I feel silly for taking all that technical effort. All I was just going to say is that I'm very supportive of all of these suggestions. And I currently live in an ADU of an older home in the Athmar Park area. There's 2 ADUs in a primary home. And I feel that this sort of housing is what allows folks who are kind of in my time of life, like wanting more independence, not wanting a bunch of roommates. Like I want my own pets and space and yard, but you know, can't or don't want to actually have like a whole home and couldn't afford one anyway. So I'm really grateful to see that this initiative is being put forward, because I think that more people like me should have access to housing options like I'm so lucky to have in my situation. And I did fill out the survey and said all of this as well. So thank
Oh,
you
great.
for all of this work.
Of course. Thank you, Caitlin. And I will say, as we're kind of reaching the end of our allotted time here, we'll just kind of finish up with the people who have not spoken yet. And at that point, I think it looks like we've got 3 more hands up. So we'll do those, and then we'll wrap up. We'll wrap up there.
Let's go ahead and try Coco again. Coco, it looks like you may have rejoined, and can you try to unmute? Okay, let's go ahead and go to Monica. Your mic you should be able to unmute.
Yep, thank you. I am here in Southeast Denver, and I was wondering, of the neighborhoods you guys have spoken to, which ones have been most in favor of these changes and which ones have been really resistant?
That's a tricky question. I think so. Let's see. Where we had our meetings often drew people from outside of those neighborhoods. So it's hard to characterize that accurately. Because when we did kind of survey the people who were in the room, they often drew people from pretty wide range. So, I don't know if I can say that there was one area that was maybe more in opposition than others. As much as I would love to, it would have been great. Our survey actually asked folks where they are from. So as we start to dive into that will give us a much better data point about kind of where people are opposed or not opposed. I will say that, it wasn't uniform anywhere. I think people are pretty cautious, but in general, because our project has some pretty strong guardrails on these first strategies, where, missing middle housing is only really allowed if it's either affordable or you're preserving the house. I think people were a lot warmer reception than I was originally expecting, and that might say something about my original expectations going into this. But we had a lot of great conversation with folks, and things are kind of slanting in that supportive direction as well in our preliminary survey as we've kind of pulled things out at different spots. So it's hard to characterize exactly where more suburban areas, I think, are generally a little bit more cautious. However, those are also a lot of the residents who are really excited about the possibility for the infill opportunity or the infill bonus, because those are often a lot of empty nesters who are changing, they've changed in their life and have different housing needs. So the individual stories are spread throughout. So yeah, I don't know if I've got a great answer for you, but more support than opposition, I'd say. I think I can say that pretty confidently.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thanks. And then it looks like David Pardo is going to be our last speaker, but I want to try one more time just to see if Coco is able to unmute. Going once, going twice. Okay, David, go ahead.
Yes. Interestingly, I get the last word. I think I might be the only Denverite that has attended all 5 meetings. But I just wanted to say you guys have been doing a great job. And sort of, I've attended all 5 meetings and every single UHC sessions, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. And the general sense I get is that, like, from having been to all of these, there are people who are concerned about aspects of this, but there hasn't been, from what I've seen, anybody who's like opposed to this as a project. They may have their issue with like, how will this work? Or how will, that aspect of this particular thing work? How will that work on this lot? But yeah, I would echo that people have been supportive, including me. I'm quite supportive. And so, yeah, just wanted to thank you again. And this has been great.
Great.
Thanks, David. Appreciate your support. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time to be here. Again, we just wanted to make sure that you all have the information that you need and had the opportunity to ask us questions and give us your input in this forum while you're kind of continuing to engage with the project. And please visit our website to follow along. We'll have our advisory committee meeting tomorrow, and we'll be looking at financial feasibility if you're interested in that in those findings. And otherwise, everyone have a great night. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everyone.